Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Great to have you in the conversation with us. We've talked frequently here on this program about Obamacare. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. The network is AFR Talk, the American Family Radio Talk Network. We've talked frequently on this program about the hazards of Obamacare. We fought this thing from day one, along with virtually every other conservative voice on the landscape, with Democrat pressure and Democrat collaboration. It passed over the objections of the entire Republican Party, both in the House and the Senate. And now we are dealing with the reality of it now, and that's hitting the American people. It's hitting them right in the wallets. Premiums are going up. Healthcare costs are going up. Because of Obamacare, work hours are going down. 28 is going to become the new 40. Employers are going to be looking for people that are willing to work less than 30 hours a week, because if they work more than 30 hours, there's a whole raft of Obamacare regulations and punishments and penalties and fines that they are subject to. So 28 is going to become the new 40. And there are other issues that you need to be aware of about pending Health and Human Services regulation, that's HHS regulations, that are related to Obamacare and the effect they're going to have on business and on you. And here to help us sort through all of that is a frequent guest on Focal Point, Twila Brase. She is the president of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. And you hear her daily Health Freedom Minute right here on Focal Point. And Twila is our go-to guru when it comes to all things dealing with the health industry and Obamacare in particular. Twila, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Thanks so much, Brian. Glad to be here.
Well, Twila, let's begin with what you are concerned about here today. Give us, if you wouldn't mind, give us a quick update about some of these new Health and Human Service regulations that are coming down the pike and kind of the time frame that's involved with these.
Right. You know, 2 days before Thanksgiving, there were several Obamacare regulations, proposed rules. Rules and regulations mean the same thing. So there were several Obamacare regulations that were put out for public comment 2 days before 2 days before Thanksgiving. Then there were several more released November 30th, and all of these, about 750 pages worth of regulations, were due for public comment either the day after Christmas or the day before New Year's or 3 days after New Year's. And so they gave the public, the American public, only 30 days to read 700 to 750 pages of regulations, to digest them, and then to respond with comments. And you realize these 30 days are over the holidays, the busiest holiday season of the year. And so very clearly they were not looking for real comments. It was a time when they're likely to get not very many comments. I think they didn't want the public to know, and they didn't want the public to respond, and they didn't want to have to respond to negative public comments. So it's really a way to hide it so that none of us know what's in it. And before we have a chance to respond, the deadline's over.
So in other words, what you're saying is that you think it's quite deliberate. The timing of this was quite deliberate on the part of the Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius and her crew. This was deliberate to try to have these regulations posted for comment at a time when Americans are not paying attention, when they're diverted by the holidays. You've got the fiscal cliff issue, was all that chaff in the air. And so you think that Health and Human Services was hoping that this would just get lost in kind of the fog of these other issues because the American people wouldn't be paying attention. I guess that raises the question, Twila, what were these regulations that only had 30 days for comment? Maybe we could start there and then have you follow up by telling us, well, what's the effect of these regulations? Why would they want to bury this so the American people did not know what was coming at them?
Well, I'm going to answer that question, but first I just want to say that the Wall Street Journal said that all of these a lot of these regulations out of HHS were ready back in May, but were just in holding pattern. But when I mentioned that to one of the federal officials, I've been calling them to see if they're going to extend the deadlines. I was told that it is the Office of Management and Budget who decides when to release them. And so the Office of Management and Budget released these 4 to 6 regulations all at about the same time, and they're the ones that have control over it. And that's just the Obama administration, so I'm not sure if Kathleen Sebelius is exactly directly responsible, but I'm sure that she probably had a hand in, when she wanted them released.
Well, and that would raise the question, Twila, if these regulations were ready to roll out back in May, they're not rolled out until November or December. It looks suspiciously to me like they wanted to wait until after the election was over.
Exactly. I do think that that's it. I think they didn't want to ruffle any feathers before the election was over, and then once the election was over, then they did it right during holiday time. Now, one of the officials told me that, they needed, because of all the stakeholders, they had a need to sort of rush them through. No, not rush them through, and that person didn't talk about that, but just needed to, move them along, right, because of the timing. But I'm sitting there thinking, well, who are the stakeholders? Really, the stakeholders are the 300 million people who are going to be impacted by whatever these regulations say. And I know you asked, what's in the regulations. Well, the fact of the matter is, our organization has only had time to sort of look, because it's 750 pages. We have holidays just like everybody else has holidays. So what we did was we asked the American public if they would write in comments saying extend the deadline by an additional 60 days.
Yeah, just give us more time to look at this.
Right. And in one of the rules, 81% of the comments said that. In another one, we got 60% of the comments saying that. And they will have to respond to the fact that all these people asked for that. But so far, we haven't heard them agreeing to extend it. So truth be told, it's just like a Nancy Pelosi. You've got to pass it so we know what's in it. Well, they intend to finalize these rules before anybody knows what's in them, and then we'll all be finding out what it is.
Wow. And so because of and the health care bill itself was 2,700 pages long, something like that. Now you're telling me that you've got, I guess, 6 regulations, and there's 750 pages just with these 6 regulations?
Well, there's 750 pages with 4 of the 6. There's like 900 and some with 6.
Oh, my gosh.
And
so you have 900 pages of regulations. Now, this is different than the law, am I right, Twila? Because these regulations aren't debated by Congress. They're not evaluated by Congress. They don't go through congressional committees where our elected officials can have some input. These are cooked up in these cubicles, in these bureaucracies in Washington, D.C.
Right, and that's the thing that, that your listeners may or may not understand, but when Congress says something like there shall be an exchange, and they have some wording about what's required, then they allow their agencies to do what's called rulemaking, and the agencies write regulations, and then they're supposed to put it out to the public and get public comment on it. And even President Obama himself, he signed an executive order very early in his time in office, which said that his agency should give at least 60 days for public comment, if possible. Now, I really think it is possible, but especially since they were ready in May, right? But now, only 30 days, and that's really not the transparency that President Obama said he was going to have for his administration. So, in a sense, or in effect, what you're saying is absolutely true. These regulations have the full force and effect of law. They are not voted on by Congress. They're not looked at by Congress, and they just move forward. And it's not just these 6 regulations. We already have, above and beyond these 6 regulations, 13,000 pages of Obamacare regulations.
Wow.
That's already. These are just 6 that they are rushing through and making sure nobody has any opportunity to really, read and respond to.
Well, and it seems, Twila, the average person look at this, saying 30 days, number one, seems like a pretty short window of time to begin with, even if the amount of material that they're asking you to weigh in on is digestible in that amount of time.
Right.
That seems like a really brief time. Then you've got it over the holidays where it's going to get lost in the chaff. And so it pretty much creates
taking vacations.
Yeah, and it creates the impression, Twila. I don't know any other conclusion you come to. They just do not want the American people to know what's in these regulations.
Right. And I'd like to tell you, I know what's in these regulations, but even our organization has not had the opportunity to fully look at them. I have looked at part of them. I know some things about part of them, and they have to do with some fees to pay for people with pre-existing conditions being added. It's a $65 a year fee on anyone who has health insurance in order to cover the cost of adding these people with pre-existing conditions. I know that some of what they're going to do to try and create risk scores on all of us, and there's a whole plan and way of doing it within this regulation, but even I haven't had the chance to read all the language to see exactly what they're planning on doing, what kind of data they're planning to collect on all of us to come up with risk scores, how they're going to give it to the federal government, how they're going to move money from one health plan to the other health plan according to the risk scores of people in this health plan and the risk scores of people in this health plan. This is very complex stuff, but yet we only had 30 days, and really when you look at it over the holidays, I'll bet it was really, you could probably put it down to maybe 14 days. If you just look at all the holiday days in there, all the weekend days in there, right? We're just talking about hardly any time at all.
And when you and talk for, we got about a minute left, about the $63 per person tack on
right
for these high-risk pools. Tell us about that.
So
and what that means. I mean, it sounds to me like they're admitting that their plan is not going to cover the cost of health care.
Well, so, everybody with any kind of condition now, every health plan has to take them in. Essentially, they're not insurance anymore. They're just third-party financiers, right? And so the cost of taking in all of these folks who haven't paid a dime for coverage to the health plan now is going to be paid by a $63 a year head tax on everybody who buys health insurance. So that for at least 3 years, although they say the cost might come down during those 3 years. But that's how they're going to pay for adding all of these folks onto the rolls of health insurance.
Our guest on a decision maker line has been Twila Brase. She is the president of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. You hear her daily 60-second radio feature, Health Freedom Minute, right here on Focal Point. She is our guru on all things related to Obamacare, talking today about these regulations that the Health and Human Services Department, the Obama administration, virtually springing on the American people, not allowing the American people time to even find out what is in them. So, Twila, we appreciate you being a watchdog for us. Thank you for your expertise and your information, and we will have you back on to talk about more of Obamacare as it unfolds.
Would you give me an opportunity to just encourage people to get on our weekly e-news, and it can be found at cchfreedom.org.
cchfreedom.org. Focal Point AFR Talk. Thank you, Twila. We'll be right back in 2 minutes.